Hi, we're at Neve Yerushalayim doing the Mystical Hebrew Alphabet series, and now we're in the letter Gimel, part 2. Yesterday we talked about how Gimel represents threeness, which fixes up disconnect of two-ness, in a world of disconnection, which hides a Shem. I can't function, I don't know which way to go, so the third thing has to fix up the disconnection between the first two. And that's what Yaakov is doing to the Chesed of Abraham and the Din of Yitzchak. He's creating MS truth, which fixes up the disconnection between the two different approaches, the Chesed-based system versus the Din-based system. So Gimel acts like a glue in that it has an affinity for this and it has an affinity for that, and therefore can bring the two together. Because if you can't connect to both, you can't bring things together. Glue has to attract to both. If a glue only sticks to one thing but not the other, then you can't use it as a glue because there'll be no connection. So let's look for hints as Gimel functioning as a glue. Let's see if we can find hints for that glue in the Torah. Remember, the third thing, threeness, fixes up disconnected two-ness. That's why it creates a certain stability that disconnection does not have. For example, in mathematics, 1 point creates a point, so it's not stable. 2 points create a line is not stable. But threeness, 3 points defines a plane, and things will stand on a plane. So a chair is stable with 3 legs. A table is stable with 3 legs. 1 and 2 are not stable, because they represent the first 2 stages. Threeness is stable because it establishes something. Make sense? Threeness works, 1 and 2 don't. That's why, for example, if you want to establish a new custom in Judaism, let's say you have a certain custom and you want to change custom. So when you do something new 3 times in a row, you've established it. It's called creating a chazaka in technical terms. Or if I were to ask you, how holy is God? You'd say, oh, that's easy. God is holy, 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 holy. I say, really? Is that as holy as he is? Well, no, he's actually more holy than that. He's really holy, 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 holy. I come back a few days later, you're still going, holy, holy, holy. Because he's infinitely holy. So how do you describe God's holiness? Well, when we pray, we say God is kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. We only say he's holy 3 times. Well, isn't that an insult? Isn't he holier than that? Yeah, but in terms of establishing something, once you do it 3 times, it's like going dot, dot, dot at the end of a sentence. So we can stop there. It's as if it goes on. Because threeness establishes something in a way that oneness and two-ness don't. You follow? Okay, so therefore there's a glue functioning as a Gimel to fix up disconnected two-ness. So let's see if we can find hints to the glue in Gimel. So the way to do it is to take the word Gimel itself, Gimel Mem Lamed, and to say, okay, how else does God use this 3-letter root in the Torah? In other words, what other words in the Torah are spelled Gimel Mem Lamed? So anybody know? Other Torah words spelled Gimel Mem Lamed? So one word is, the word Gomel means to give. You ever heard the Mishnah Pirkei Avos that says the world stands on 3 things? Learning Torah, prayer, and Gimilut, Chasadim, being Gomel Chesed. So Gomel means to give. So that's one use of the word Gimel. When it's not being used as a noun to represent the 3rd letter of the alphabet, the root is the root for giving or bestowing. Okay? What other word is it? Well, a gamal is what animal? A camel. Good. So the same 3 letters is used in the Torah for a camel. And then the 3rd use of the word Gimel is very hard to spot. It doesn't appear very often in the text, but if you pretend the Torah is like a sifter, you know, where you pour like flour or something in a sifter, F-L-O-U-R, in a sifter, and it sifts out the flour and traps all the stones or whatever it is. So if you pretend the Torah is a sifter, so Hashem's pouring all of history in the sifter, and anything important is trapped in the sifter and put in the text of the Torah. But anything we don't need to know can fall through the sifter. Like when Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac, what was the weather that day? partly cloudy with a chance of clearing. So the Torah doesn't discuss the weather. So that information fell through the sifter. Or what did they eat for breakfast that morning? 2 eggs over easy? Breakfast is not mentioned in the Torah. It's not important enough to put in the text. But certain things you and I think are not important are trapped in the sifter and put in the text of the Torah. For example, when Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac, it says he rode on a donkey. And you and I are thinking, well, 1 second. The Torah's not a book of transportation. I don't care how he got there. Tell me, did he kill his son or not? What difference? I don't care if he walked. Torah says, no, that's not true. Because everything in the Torah has to have a deeper meaning behind it. So a donkey is a chamor. And the word chamor, donkey, is the same word as chomer, physicality. So when you see people riding on a donkey, on a deeper level, it represents riding control of the physical world. You're in control of your physical drives. You can steer it, you can direct it. You're on top of it. So it's a hint that Abraham's on a very high level when he goes to sacrifice Isaac. It's actually a hint that the test is passable. The donkey's not riding on him. Otherwise, God would have skipped the information. Who cares how he got to the place where he sacrificed? Okay? So therefore, everything trapped in the sifter is critical. Now, let's go back to the sifter. And if we look for parties that God traps in the sifter and put in the text of the Torah, there are very few. Like, for example, one party that is mentioned in the Torah is a party that was made when Yaakov married his wife, Rachel. So it says that Lavan, who was his uncle and his future father-in-law, gathered the men of the town and made a great feast. What was the celebration? The wedding. So you see that is mentioned in the Torah. There is a wedding celebration mentioned when Yaakov was supposed to marry Rachel. Now, the question you can ask is, I don't get it. Why is that wedding mentioned in the Torah, but the wedding between Abraham and Sarah is not? There's no mention of a wedding. It's safe to assume they got married, right? And there's no mention of a wedding by Yitzchak and Rivka. And there's no mention of a wedding by Moshe and his wife. We assume all these people got married. God says, yeah, but I'm not putting that in the text of the Torah. You don't need to study it for the next few thousand years. This one is in the text of the Torah. So what made his wedding different from everybody else's wedding that God puts that information in the Torah and skips everybody else's weddings? Do you remember what happened when Yaakov tried to marry Rachel? When Yaakov tried to marry Rachel, his uncle, who became his future father-in-law, switched wives. So he ends up marrying the wrong sister. And he ends up married to Leah. So since he gets tricked at that wedding into the wrong bride, that's critical enough that we need to know, affects the future of the Jewish people, that Hashem put that wedding into the Torah. But the other weddings fell through the sifter. It's not that they didn't take place. It's just God doesn't trap the information about those weddings and put it in the text for us to study. You follow? Good. So now, there's another celebration that's trapped in the sifter and put in the text of the Torah. And again, I'm looking for other uses of the word Gimel, right? Gimel. So in this case, there is a celebration that Abraham made for Yitzchak. Now what celebration, and it wasn't when Yitzchak got married, what celebration would Abraham make for Isaac? What famous thing happened to Isaac that Abraham would celebrate and God would say, yeah, that's good. I'm going to trap that in the sifter and put it in the text of the Torah so everyone can study it for the next few thousand years. So you think, well, the famous thing I know about is that Abraham almost sacrificed Yitzchak on the altar. So maybe it was one of these, thank God I didn't have to kill you, my son, parties. Yeah? So no, there was no party celebration after Abraham was told not to kill his son, so that can't be it. The truth is, this party was made when Yitzchak was very young. So you'd say, oh, I know, Yitzchak was the first Jew to be circumcised on the 8th day. Because Abraham got the mitzvah of circumcision when he was 99 years old. Yishmael was 13 years old. So the first Jew of the Jewish people to be circumcised on the 8th day was Yitzchak. So maybe it was a circumcision party. And the Torah says, interestingly, it was a weaning party. And the verb there is gamah. it says that Avraham made a party when he gamaled Yitzchak. But in this case, the word gamal is used to mean wean. So we've got a weaning party. Now, we all know weaning means that little Yitzchak didn't have to nurse from his mother anymore, right? Up until a certain age, a baby nurses. Then when you wean the baby, they can drink from a cup, like a sippy cup or something. I don't know if they had sippy cups back then, but you got the idea, sippy cup. Anyway, so Avraham makes a weaning party for Yitzchak. I assume he was probably, maybe, 2 years old. I don't know how old kids are when they're weaned, but so that's strange. Why would God take a weaning party, use this root for the word wean, and trap that in the sifter, put it in the text of the Torah? For the next few thousand years, we have to see that Abraham made a weaning party for Yitzchak. Now listen, it's as strange as the wedding. Because remember, did Abraham and Sarah get married? Yes. Did they have a wedding ceremony? Yes. Does God mention in the Torah? No. How about Yitzchak and Rivka? They get married? Yes. Is it mentioned in the Torah? No. How about Moshe and his wife? No. Why do we need this one? Because something weird happened. So is it safe to assume that when Abraham was a baby, he got weaned? Yes. Did anyone make a party? Theoretically, no. When Yitzchak got weaned, did anyone make a party? Yes. It's in the Torah. How about when little Yaakov was a baby? Did he get weaned? Yes. Is there a weaning party for Yaakov in the Torah? No. How about when Moshe grew up? Did he have a weaning party? No. Was he weaned? Yes. It's safe to assume. Yeah. So why are weaning parties getting into the Torah? In other words, if weaning parties are so important, then we Jews have to read about it and study it for the next few thousand years. Are people having weaning parties and not inviting me? Like, is this one of these things nobody wants me to... What's the big deal of a weaning party? So based on our class, you tell me, why would Abraham make a weaning party for Yitzchak, considering all children get weaned? Why would Abraham be inclined to celebrate it? And God said, that's excellent. I'm going to put that in the Torah because I want Jews to study that for the next few thousand years. But nobody else gets a weaning party. Do you hear the question? Listen, the answer to why Yaakov's wedding got in the Torah is because he was tricked into marrying the wrong woman. Why is Yitzchak getting a weaning party and God wants us to study it when everyone got weaned, but it's safe to assume they're not getting parties? Why would Abraham make a weaning party for Yitzchak? Because what's weaning?
Is mother's milk.
No, that's when you're not weaned. That's called nursing.
It's drinking from a sippy cup.
Correct. And why would Abraham celebrate that in Yitzchak, but nobody's celebrating that for anybody else?
Because it became a big boy.
Yeah, but use terminology that I taught you today. Abraham's trade he works on his entire lifetime is chesed. So what's chesed? Giving, correct. Now, when Abraham has a baby, the one thing he can figure out is, my baby is not my clone. My baby's not me. So what's the stage in creation after chesed? Because remember, Abraham is emulating the fact that God created everything from chesed. Step 2 is din, right? That's why after you have that first chapter of creation is all Elohim din. The Elohim said, let there be light. Elohim said, let there be land. Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. It's all din, 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 din. Because all the rules of nature are how Shem hides, right? So therefore, Abraham's looking for stage 2. He's not looking for another stage 1. So while little Yitzchak is really young and he's nursing, Abraham concludes that he's not independent yet. See, din is always independence. Chesed is what can I do for you, how can I help you? Din is I don't need handouts, I don't need favors, I can do this on my own, just tell me what to do. So what's nursing? Well, your mother goes to work, she makes some money, she uses the money to buy food, she cleans it, she chops it, she cooks it, she chews it, she swallows it, and then she turns it into everything the little baby could want. But the baby's nursing from pure chesed, right? Nursing is pure chesed. The baby does nothing. So as long as little Yitzchak is dependent on handouts, he's not really din. Because din is, I don't need favors, I don't need platform shoes to make me look taller, I don't need color contacts to shift my ankle. I can do this on my own, just tell me what to do. That's the power of din. So when Abraham's watching for Yitzchak to be the next stage, as long as he's dependent on being nursed, he's not really Yitzchak yet. So once he's independent and can do things on his own, Abraham says that's a celebration. And Hashem says, you're right, and I'm putting it in the Torah. And nobody else gets a weaning party because nobody else is the pure din of Yitzchak. So we don't need to see it by Moshe, we don't need to see it by Yaakov, we don't need to see it by Abraham. Even though they were all weaned, they don't get the parties. So Hashem says to Abraham, you're right, he's not you. And now that he is independent, and he doesn't need the chesed from his mommy anymore, he can really start to become who he is. You follow? So now, ladies, back to my original question, okay? My original question was, if Yaakov, the third thing, represents the glue that can fix up the disconnection of the first two. And remember, a glue only works if it has an affinity for A and an affinity for B. It can stick A and B together. If a glue has an affinity for A and not B, it's not going to work, correct? So now, let's go back. When Hashem uses the word Gimel in the Torah, he doesn't use it to mean the third letter of the alphabet. We're using it that way. Hashem uses it in three different contexts: giving, weaning, and a camel. So let's put aside camels. We'll come back to camels in a minute or two. Just put aside camels. Do you now see when Hashem uses the word Gimel in the Torah, he's using it as a glue to bring those opposites together? How do you see it? Look how Hashem uses the words, and show me how built into the use of the words is the glue that brings the opposites together. Giving is chesed. Excellent. Weaning is din. You have to do this on your own. I'm not going to help you anymore. Now do you see the built-in glue? In the word Gimel, in the Torah, is a chesed component and a din component, and now you see why Yaakov can bring the two together. The third thing can bring those first two stages, which are opposite stages, together, because the word Gimel has both aspects in it, so it can stick to itself. It's got these two in it so that it can bring them together. Fine, so let's answer camels. Why did Hashem also use the word for a camel? In other words, what is it that Hashem said, every animal really represents some sort of concept, right? You can figure that out. Like lions are always thematically kingship, right? Like Disney did in The Lion King. There's a reason for that, right? And we did a donkey is physicality. Chamor is the same as chomer, right? It's physicality, so donkeys represent the physical world. So what is unique in the animal kingdom about a camel? Forget about the humps, forget about what it looks like. Just what is the unique attribute of a camel that's different from other animals?
They spit, which is like...
Not spit. There are other animals that spit. This is not National Geographic, okay? It's not about spitting. Yes, they don't dehydrate the same as other animals. In other words, what makes a camel unique is it's the animal that goes through the desert carrying people or packages or whatever these... They've been doing this for thousands of years with camels, right? So it's the animal that crosses the Sahara Desert, goes for weeks without drinking, whereas your horse is dead within a day, and your donkey is dead within a day, and your sheep and your goats and your cat, everybody dies because there's no water. But with a camel, if you fill it up with enough water, it'll take you on a journey across the desert that no other animal can do for you. So that's a very unique attribute for an animal that God spells with the same letters. So let's think if we can understand what God's hinting to that a camel represents, okay? So now, let's say, I don't know the numbers, so when you fill a camel up with water, let's say it drinks, I'm making this up, but let's say before it crosses the desert, it has to drink, 20 liters of water or something outrageous. So what would filling up that camel with water, what would that represent in terms of how we've been talking this? It would represent chesed, right? You got to give it an initial chesed. You got to fill it with water. It can't cross the desert if it hasn't drunk anything in 6 months, right? So you need to give it its initial chesed. But once you give it its initial chesed and fill it with water, it now achieves an independence. Remember, din is I don't need favors, I don't need handouts, I don't need anything from anybody. Once you give it its initial chesed, a camel achieves its independence that it doesn't need anything from anybody, which enables it to walk through the Sahara Desert, and it's 110 degrees every day, or 120 degrees, and it's like, hey, nice day, I wonder if it'll be like this tomorrow, and it's fine. Everything else is dropping dead all around it. So if you're riding on a camel across the desert, because it got its initial chesed 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, it's getting you through the desert in a way your horse and your donkey and your goats and your everyone else can't. You follow? So let's talk Gimel language. Here we go, ready? When you give the camel its initial chesed, meaning you fill it with water, it achieves an independence that allows you to go through the desert of life in a way that no one else can get you through that desert. Which means the din of not needing anything for those few weeks, metaphorically speaking, the din of not needing anything for those few weeks enables a camel to do a higher level chesed for you than your horse or your donkey or your whatever it is you're trying to get through life with. You follow? So once it gets its chesed, it achieves its independence. But because of its independence, it's doing a higher level chesed for you than other things could, because other things don't achieve the same independence. They still need the water every few hours. So let's talk life. Give it its chesed, it gives you independence. Once it gives you independence, it does a higher level chesed for you in life than other things do. Okay? So that's why the animal that represents the more powerful chesed. Remember last class we said that pure chesed is destructive and pure din is destructive. But when you blend chesed and din together, you get a much more powerful chesed. Like limiting the good you do for people, believe it or not, is actually a greater gift than just destroying them with too much giving. Okay, so that's what a camel is. Give it its chesed, it gets independence. But because it gets independence, it's doing more powerful chesed for you than other things can. Okay, I just said the same thing about 10 times, but are you all with me? How about you guys over here? You with me? Okay. So now, based on this, there's a story in the Torah. You know how we said the Torah is like a sifter and everything we don't need to know falls through the sifter, but everything we do need to know is trapped in the sifter, put in the text? So there's no extra information. Everything in the Torah must be critical. So there's a story in the Torah where there's seemingly extra information that does not seem critical. And yet if God put it in the story, it must be critical. So let's go back to after Abraham was supposed to sacrifice Isaac, and he doesn't. God says, don't kill him, so he doesn't kill him. And now Abraham says, you know, Isaac's older now, I need to find a wife for him. So Yitzchak, Isaac, is the only patriarch of the three patriarchs who never leaves the land of Israel. Abraham was born outside the land of Israel. Yaakov spends a good percentage of his life outside the land of Israel. Yitzchak never sets foot outside the land of Israel. Why? Because Yitzchak was asked by God to climb up on an altar like a sacrifice. So since he was similar to a sacrifice, we have a rule in Judaism that says when the temple was standing in Jerusalem, when you brought a sacrifice on the altar, the sacrifice meat itself, which could be eaten, many sacrifices were actually eaten by priests or by the people who brought them, right? You could eat the roast from the sacrifice, was never allowed to be taken outside of Jerusalem. Once the sacrifice was brought, it can never be eaten outside of Jerusalem. In other words, you couldn't take it back to Beersheba to eat it. So for Yitzchak, since he was a human sacrifice almost, his Jerusalem that he never left became the land of Israel. So he never set foot outside the land of Israel. So Abraham says, I'd like my son Yitzchak to marry one of my cousins back in the land where I grew up, which was a land called Padan Aram. So Abraham and Sarah were from there, and Rivka was from there, right? So Abraham says, I want Yitzchak to marry one of my cousins, but he can't leave the land of Israel to go meet somebody. So Abraham says to his servant Eliezer, I want you to go back to the town I was born in. hundreds of miles away. Meet my cousins there and see if there's an eligible girl that we're related to who will agree to come back and marry Yitzchak. And Eliezer says, yeah, but what if I meet a nice girl and she says, I can't marry somebody I've never met before. Can you bring Yitzchak there to meet her? Avram said to Eliezer, forget it. If she won't come back to marry him, then he can't go there, so forget the whole thing. Fine. So Eliezer says, okay, I'll try. So then the Torah adds information we don't need to know. And that is, it says when Eliezer went to this town to hunt for a wife, he took 10 camels with him. Now, what's that doing in the text? Did he also take horses? Probably. But God doesn't mention it. Did he also take goats or sheep, whatever, so they'd have food along the way? Yeah, probably. But the Torah doesn't mention it. Did he take donkeys? I'm sure. Torah doesn't mention it. So why does the Torah go out of his way to say that Eliezer took 10 camels with him when he went to this town across the desert to try to find a wife for Yitzchak? And the answer is because when he got to the town and there were all these women there, and Eliezer said to God, listen, I don't know if you've chosen one of these girls to marry my master's son, Yitzchak, but if you have one in mind, I need to know that. This is a prayer he's doing to God. You got to help me out here because there's lots of girls here, and I don't know if you picked one of them for Yitzchak. The truth is, God did pick one. Her name was Rivka, but Eliezer doesn't know this. So Eliezer says, okay, let's do it this way. Let's do a test. What was the test? The girl who, do you remember the story?
Yeah.
The girl who, right, the girl who's willing to give water to my camels, that's the girl you want to marry Yitzchak. Now why, based on the class we just learned, is that an incredibly perfect test? Why was that genius? Because Yitzchak represents Din. And Din is always independence, correct? So Eliezer is standing there in town. There's dozens of young women there. So he says, listen, God, if you pick one of them, I have no clue. But I'm going to devise a test. The girl who comes and offers water to my camels, she's the right girl for Yitzchak. Now, why is that perfect? Because what does a camel represent? Camel represent, if you give it its initial chesed, it doesn't need anything from anybody, and then it can produce a higher level chesed. Correct? So if Yitzchak's going to build the Jewish people and create a Yaakov, he needs a woman who's going to feed that chesed to him. Yitzchak represents independence, but he needs to build the Jewish people. So Eliezer's like, well, there has to be a source of chesed for Yitzchak, so Yitzchak achieves the independence to create a future of the Jewish people. That's going to be stage 3, which is a Yaakov. Right? So the woman who gives chesed to Yitzchak will enable Yitzchak to achieve the independence, and he creates a Yaakov. Yaakov represents the higher level chesed that comes from chesed blended with din. That's what a camel represents. So the test of the camel was exactly what Yitzchak needed, so Yitzchak could build the Jewish people, and therefore the girl who gave water to the camels represents that idea. You follow? That is the deeper idea of the letter Gimel. Threeness, fixing up disconnected two-ness. That's going from chesed to din and down to emes. And that's why threeness always creates a stability. It establishes something that oneness and two-ness cannot establish. And we'll work on the shape of the Gimel when we do the letter Dalet. Okay, we'll stop over here.